So it's been an eventful match day 10 in the Premier League. I think the two biggest games, certainly the two biggest story points were Tottenham losing at home to Chelsea and Man United's glorious winning run coming to an end at Nottingham Forest, albeit in heroic fashion with a late draw. So James and Rob, you were both James, you were at Tottenham, Rob, you were at Forest. We'll start with James first. Obviously, another home defeat for Spurs. Got quite messy at the end for Thomas Frank. How do you view the situation at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, the piece I did from the game was to sort of compare. It was almost 2 years to the day since Tottenham lost 4-1 at home to Chelsea, and it was Ange Postecoglou's first defeat. And they serenaded him. They sang him, they literally sang him off the pitch. And so kind of enamoured were they with the style of play and with the sort of free-flowing champagne football that Postecoglou was serving up right at the start of his tenure. And it just served as such a contrast to the situation that Thomas Frank is currently in, where his team was booed off at half-time, they were booed off at full-time, and it appeared as though two of his players, Micky Van de Ven and Djed Spence, ignored him as he tried to say something to them as they left the field. Presumably, can you go and acknowledge the supporters? And they decided to walk straight down the tunnel. I think we'll be hearing more about that as the days go on. But the situation, I had to check. I had to keep checking that the Premier League table showed that at full time they were still in third place. Now, okay, they've dropped to fifth as a result of what happened elsewhere, and of course they could drop at the time of recording. They could drop again with Sunderland due to play. But a sort of remarkable kind of juxtaposition of the results versus the feeling. And I guess that kind of brings us back to where we were with Postecoglou, which is that a lot of those Spurs fans had the feeling, but not the results, and it became this whole, I think we thought this whole existential crisis of what do Tottenham want to be would be over when they won that trophy. That, okay, they've won the trophy, the sort of monkey's off their back in that regard. Now they can go and build and try and become a club that really establishes themselves right at the summit and challenges for the big prizes year on year. And that's the frustration that Frank is feeling at the moment. It's again something that transcends the current manager. It's not been put to bed by that Europa League win. It's now a case of, well, look, we want to see some proper good football here. We don't want to just win games through sort of defensive resilience and set pieces. Now, I think we should also say that it was one of the worst home performances you will ever see from a Premier League team statistically. Their XG was 0.05. Now, I think a lot of people make too much of expected goals as a sort of barometer of what's going on, but that is stark. I mean, they could play that game 20 times and score one goal. That's how bad it was statistically. And you can understand from that point of view why the fans wanted to see a little bit more.
Just what you said a moment ago, James, about the Djed Spence and Van de Ven situation. You were there, so you got a better feel for it than Rob or I would have. But I've seen it back a couple of times, and I'm thinking, what's the fuss about? But, obviously, Thomas Frank wanted them both to stay on the pitch, and Spence, probably more than Van de Ven, was like, no. But the players just want to get off the pitch. When did it start to become a necessity for players to basically put their hands up and say, I'm really sorry, guys, you didn't play very well today? It seems to have come in the last couple of years where players almost like demand to be forgiven from the fans for having a bad performance when they just want to get off the pitch. Now, was it really that disrespectful?
I'm amazed that you've gone that way. I thought you'd have gone completely the other way.
Nah, I thought it was nothing.
It's about the dissent, though, isn't it?
It's a bad look. The optics of it are awful.
They weren't having a go at each other. He just got off the pitch. I don't know.
No. It's not that. It's that the manager is telling the players to do something and the players are ignoring him. Now, that probably goes on 100 times a day, but we don't see it. And what we're seeing there is Thomas Frank clearly, because you can see the lingering kind of look he gives them as they walk past him and go down the tunnel. They've clearly disobeyed. But whatever he was asking, they've clearly disobeyed him.
That's more on him than them, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but the point is not about. It's not about should they say something to the fans, should they show some sort of conciliation or apology to the fans. It's more that if it's a sense that he's losing control or is not entirely in control of that dressing room, and that is a dangerous thing for fans and journalists and all of us to see publicly, because it starts to undermine his authority. And when results are not going your way, and if this conversation continues to turn in a sort of negative sense for Thomas Frank in a wider point, that is going to be a stick he's going to be beaten.
You're right what you say.
That's why it's a big deal.
You're right what you say about how it's seen as from fans. I remember watching the Super Cup, the PSG game, and thinking then long throws, long free kicks from the goalkeeper. The Spurs fans will not like this when they start losing games. And are we at that point now where they had a decent start, 3 wins out of the first 4 games, and then all of a sudden it's gone off the rails a bit, and they don't like the football, they don't like losing. But like you said, the 5th, or certainly they went into Monday morning before Sunderland played Everton in 5th. It's crazy that they're already turning on him. But maybe it's deeper seated than that. Maybe there's a reason why they are turning on him already.
Well, this is why I go back to my first answer, which is that I think the wider context transcends Thomas Frank. This is about the frustration that Tottenham fans feel that their club is not where it should be, and they can't protest towards Daniel Levy anymore. He's not there. He's not there anymore. The change in, or slight tweak in ownership that many of them have been calling for has happened now. So the fans have got to, if they're frustrated, they've got to point it somewhere, and they're pointing at the team. I was really surprised about how loud it was, because let me tell you, it was unavoidable at half-time and at full-time. And you sensed it throughout the second half, because you mentioned the set pieces, okay? The reason why that was lauded, particularly at the start, was because Spurs were so bad at them under Postecoglou. They famously did not have a specialist set-piece coach, which in this day and age looks like an outlier, looks like a bit of a mistake when you look at what the top sides are doing. And defensively, we all know how easy they were to play against. And Thomas Frank had sort of sorted that part of it out and actually made them quite effective from set-pieces. But in the second half of that game, there were a couple of instances where Pedro Porro would have a free kick and he just aimlessly put it into the box straight for Robert Sanchez to collect as a goalkeeper. And a couple more times, Kudus had a corner straight into Sanchez's arms. And right at the end of the game, the final act was Vicario to Spence, Spence back to Vicario to Spence, knocking it forward straight into Sanchez's arms. And you could hear with every single play it getting louder and more frustrated and more anger and more hostility growing in that fan base, who just felt as though there was nothing, there was no creativity, no clue. And if the set pieces aren't going to get them out of it, then it shifts the focus to the lack of creativity in the team as a whole. And this point is where I have a lot of sympathy with Frank, because Spurs didn't have a great window. You know, they tried to sign Morgan Gibbs-White. They didn't get that deal over the line. There were a lot of mitigating circumstances there in Spurs' defence, but they didn't get that deal over the line. They tried to get Eberechi Eze. He ended up joining Arsenal. And right at the end of the window, they got Xavi Simons and Randall Kolo-Muani. Now, Simons has taken a while to get up to speed and doesn't look a natural fit, but it's very early days. Kolo-Muani, of course, arrived injured, and he's only sort of himself getting back up to full fitness and probably isn't still in a place where he can play 90 minutes. So then you're relying on Richarlison, because, of course, Dominic Solanke's still out injured. Kulusevski's injured. James Maddison is injured. So to sort of ask Thomas Frank, with all of these various situations, to produce this kind of free-flowing attacking football that they want to see, allied to the defensive side of the game, it's too early to expect them to be that cohesive at both ends of the pitch. So I understand why he prioritised safety first. Let's organise ourselves properly and be a threat from set pieces. The rest can come later, because the rest is the difficult bit, isn't it? We all talk to top coaches, past and present. If you want to organise a team, that's the easy bit. Getting them to create and sort of roll teams over, that's the hard bit.
I mean, Rob, you've got your point on this. I just want to make the point that it was Chelsea, wasn't it? If it had been Arsenal or Chelsea, that's the worst possible opponent for Spurs to lose to in that fashion. But Rob, go on, you were.
And it's at home. I mean, I think part of the problem is the home form. You cannot get away with losing games at home. You can get away with losing games away, particularly when you're at the start of a managerial tenure. I think it's really important to win games at home when you're starting out, because it gives the fans something to buy into. And look at the Premier League. Obviously, this has been recorded before Sunderland Everton on Monday night, but at the moment, Spurs are 5th in the table. They're unbeaten in the Champions League. They're obviously not doing an awful lot wrong. And I think in the Premier League, if they'd had the results at home that they'd had away, that just the home and away form was flipped, I don't think that we would be having the same conversation. Just because simply the results have come at home and you're in front of your own fans and you give them something to kind of get behind. And I was looking at some of the stats, and obviously Thomas Frank is not responsible for this entire record, but over the last year, so going back to October 2024, Spurs have had 20 Premier League home games and won 4, which is only one fewer, I think, than West Ham, which says everything about their home form. Obviously, Postecoglou is part of that, but it's obviously something that Frank hasn't been able to fix either. And I just think if you start winning home games, it solves half of this, regardless of the style of football you're playing and the lack of creativity.
So, James, is it the Spurs fans? Are they unrealistically impatient?
I don't think we'd be talking about this as much as we are if the Spurs fans hadn't reacted as they did. And I can understand it because Rob's right. They've been turning up for weeks, well, for a year now, basically. And more likely than not, their team is going to lose. And that builds its own sense of frustration. But I do think they need to show a little bit more patience and just accept that there's been a lot of change at the top end of the club this summer. We know about, obviously, ENIC stepping back. ENIC kind of taking control, I should say, rather. Daniel Levy stepping down. All of those changes in the boardroom. Obviously, they've changed the manager. There have been transfer market changes as well, and they missed out, as I say, on a lot of targets. You can't expect to put all that together and then sort of sit here at the beginning of November and think, oh, we should be, top 6. Oh, by the way, we are. It did feel as though there's not been enough of it was a frustration, I think, at just how bad a performance that was in isolation, I hope. I don't think it was a wider commentary on Thomas Frank and his management just yet. I think it's literally 0.05 XG. You play that game 20 times and they score 1 goal. I don't know how to put it clearer than that. That is a difficult watch. And I hope from the Tottenham fans' perspective that it's a frustration about that rather than, a judgment on Thomas Frank, who I think it's just too early to sort of say if he could be a success in that role.
It's his problem, though. And I totally agree with what you're saying. It's way too early, and Tottenham fans need to kind of take a reality check and realise where they are. They've won a trophy, etc. But next 2 games, Man United at home, they beat 4 times last season, and then Arsenal away. Now, they're 2 big games in any season, aren't they? But at this stage, because of the situation that is beginning to bubble away at Tottenham, they are massive games now. Because if they come out of those fixtures without a win, maybe with 2 defeats, then where do we stand then?
Yeah, I mean, look, they are 2 big games. They come, either side of the international break. I suspect that if Tottenham lose to Manchester United at the weekend, that the focus on Thomas Frank will go up another notch. But look, we cannot be sat here thinking Thomas Frank's job's in jeopardy. I just feel we're nowhere near that stage at the moment. He needs to get his squad fully fit for starters. I don't think he wants to start with Richarlison or Kolo Muani. I think he wants to start with Dominic Solanke. It's been a sort of slow process in being able to get him fit. There is some chat that he could make either one or the other of those games. I think if they can get him up back to speed, obviously Maddison and Kulusevski are key elements of this as well. I think we can only really judge him when he's got those attacking players fit and available, and then see what they can create and what they can produce. I mean, he was quite bullish after the game, Thomas Frank. He sort of said, people who see me as a defensive coach, I mean, they've obviously not watched my style of play. I've always managed teams that create and score goals. Well, he's going to have to do that, because if he doesn't, then that noise is going to grow louder and louder.